Hello, everybody. Afternoon, and welcome to this webinar where we're going to update you on the changes to the way we'll be inspecting education and our renewed approach, with a focus on what these changes mean for maintained nursery schools. My name is Kirsty Godfrey. I'm Senior His Majesty's Inspector working in the schools and early education team, and I'm joined by two colleagues who've been instrumental in the development of the renewed approach. John Lucas, Senior His Majesty's Inspector, and Mireille McGrailed, His Majesty's Inspector. And so we're going to start the session thinking about all of the changes that apply to all education remits before we move on to schools and then on to those specific differences for maintained nursery schools. And at this point, I'm going to ask me and my colleagues to turn off our cameras so that you can really focus on that presentation. So an outline to today's session. Our journey so far, where we're determined to raise standards and improve lives, with disadvantaged and vulnerable children and learners at the heart of what we do. We know that our work is valued by children, parents, carers, and decision makers. But we also know we need to reset our relationship with the sectors we inspect and regulate. Last year's Big Listen heard from many thousands of parents and professionals whose feedback has helped us make changes to the way we work. This year, we consulted on a new approach to inspecting education providers from this autumn. And this includes introducing a new look Ofsted report card for parents and carers. We'll be sharing with you the changes we'll be making from November 2025 and what they mean for schools, and in particular, maintained nursery schools. Now, if you're working in early years in a primary school, you'll find much of the session relevant, but you might also find it helpful to watch one of our webinars aimed at primary schools. And if you're from a registered early years setting, you might want to watch one of the webinars aimed at early years registered providers. Now, when you get to the end of the session, we've allowed around 10 minutes so that we can answer any questions that you might have. But of course, we had a lot of pre-submitted questions, so thank you for taking the time to submit those. We've tried to weave as many of them into the presentation as we can. Every one of us has a desire to work for all pupils, children and learners, apprentices and trainees to receive a high quality of education and training. An education that enables everyone to achieve, belong, and thrive. And of course, to achieve great outcomes. This is about raising standards. Children get one childhood, and we'll continue to put them first. We want great outcomes for all of our children. And if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for all. For the first time, inclusion will be the focus of every inspection. Parents have told us that they want better and more detailed information about where their child's school, nursery, or college has strengths and areas for improvement highlighted. We want to celebrate a school's strengths, validate what leaders are telling us about their school, and work with leaders to highlight what needs developing further. And we remain committed to improving how it feels to be inspected, while continuing to encourage and support providers to raise standards. We don't expect any provider to be doing more than it needs to just for Ofsted. And the inspection toolkit is based on those statutory duties and guidance and non-statutory guidance, professional standards, research, and inspection evidence. We're committed to working with leaders to determine the areas of inspection focus and agree the most appropriate activities tailored to the context of that provider. So let's have a look at that journey so far. Following last year's Big Listen, we set out our ambition to reset relationships with the professionals we inspect and regulate, while maintaining the confidence of children, parents, and carers. This included reviewing the education inspection framework and introducing new report cards. In February 2025, our 12-week consultation set out a series of proposals for change, covering early years, state-funded schools, non-association independent schools, FE and skills, and IT providers. Over 6,500 responses came in, alongside insights from focus groups, expert discussions, test visits, and independent research. Today's changes are grounded in that rich evidence. Alongside our consultation response, which is available on gov.uk, we've published updated inspection toolkits and operating guides that reflect a more empathetic, child focused approach, especially for those who are disadvantaged or vulnerable, while making sure that we don't lose sight of our core purpose and our collective drive to raise standards. These reforms will come into effect in November 2025 for early years, state funded schools, and further education colleges. The changes will come into effect for ITE and independent schools from January. Our proposals were not set in stone. We've carefully listened to all of the feedback from the consultation, and we've tested and further refined our methodology. We believe our new approach represents the right balance between the interests of parents and children and the wishes of educational professionals. Our core purpose and driving mission is to keep children and learners safe and improve their lives. So, a few key changes include a new inspection report card to highlight excellence and identify areas for improvement, driving high and rising standards. Now, the report card will provide more nuance for parents and providers, combining an at a glance grade with narrative summaries of strengths and areas for improvement. Following extensive feedback and user testing of February's proposed version, the report card has been redesigned to make it more accessible, and particularly on mobile devices. We have a new 5-point grading scale to set high expectations while encouraging improvement where it is needed. In response to feedback from professionals and parents about the proposed terminology, the final set of grades has changed to urgent improvement, needs attention, expected standard, strong standard, and exceptional. And that's to identify the very best provision in the country. In a change from the initial proposals, providers will not be asked to submit case studies for approval. Instead, inspectors will evaluate exceptional practice by applying the toolkit, subject to the usual quality assurance and consistency checking. A renewed focus on inclusion is another change, by introducing a new inclusion evaluation area to help break down barriers to learning and well-being. Inspectors will evaluate whether education providers are providing high quality support for all children and learners, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, those who have SEND, and those who are known or previously known to social care. We'll have new inspection toolkits for grading providers. Toolkits show providers and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on and how we'll assess and grade providers. There's a wider range of evaluations areas than in our current methodology, but following feedback, the number of those core evaluation areas has been streamlined. In response to feedback, the definitions of grades have been tightened to more clearly differentiate between them. The standards covered in the toolkit have also been slimmed down to provide greater clarity on the evidence inspectors will assess. And a new inspection methodology to reduce the workload for the education workforce. Much of our inspection methodology comprises of inspection activities you'll already be familiar with, such as speaking with parents and pupils and visiting lessons. The toolkits are designed to assess the professional standards, statutory and non-statutory requirements that are already placed on schools. New operating guides set out the times at which inspectors can arrive on site and the suggested latest times they should be departing to cap the length of those inspection days. We'll evaluate providers' work to support and promote leader and staff well-being, and this will be considered as part of the leadership and governance evaluation area. Inspection findings will be grounded in a clear understanding of each provider's unique circumstances. The new operating guides set out how leaders and inspectors will reflect on a provider's context and priorities. A new online insights platform Ofsted in Explore an Area gives parents key information about the education and care services in their local area. There's a new system for monitoring schools where improvement is needed to offer reassurance to parents and carers. These inspections will allow providers to improve from needs attention grades and have improvements recognised more quickly. And to drive consistent and fair inspections, school and independent school inspectors will be led by full-time His Majesty's inspectors. These experienced inspectors will oversee the inspection, building a professional relationship with the leaders, including any nominee, to deliver a more collaborative experience. In addition, Ofsted will introduce a programme of work to assess consistency in school inspections, including having a senior inspector shadow a sample of live inspections to guide and advise the inspection team. Post-inspection, any initial differences between the senior inspector and the team will then be analysed. Increased resource and training for inspection teams. That will help drive quality and consistency. An additional school inspector will add capacity to the team, allowing the lead inspector to spend more time with leaders, including any nominee, as well as overseeing and quality assuring the inspection. And now, John, I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Kirsty, and good afternoon, everybody. Let's look in more detail at our new approach. And we'll begin with an overview. Looking at the top row from left to right, we'll put children first, breaking barriers down by raising standards up, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable. We'll improve the way we report the content of inspection findings to parents and carers, and we'll improve the look and feel of inspection for education providers and professionals with a more collaborative approach. And we'll maintain our focus on having care and concern for the well-being and workload of those we inspect. And moving to the bottom row, we'll take context into greater account on inspection. We'll make inspections consistent in approach and continue to improve our process for allowing leaders to raise any issues about their inspection. And we will provide constructive advice to improve based on conversations with leaders. And finally, different by design. We've further tailored our inspection approach to each remit and provision type within them. For example, we've worked to align regulation and inspection standards in the early years. And now to inclusion. As I've just said, we put children first, breaking down barriers by raising standards, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable. That is why we're introducing a separate inclusion evaluation area, and inclusion will be a key theme across the other evaluation areas. Our inspections will look at how schools are addressing barriers to learning for all children. We will always start with those the government asks schools to focus on, whether through statutory obligations or non-statutory guidance. That is why we're particularly emphasising those from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with SEND, and those known or previously known to social care. We will also evaluate how well schools ensure this high-quality support for all children who may face other barriers to their learning and/or well-being. As part of understanding the barriers most relevant to a school, inspectors will make use of demographic data to understand a school's cohort, and crucially, they will speak with leaders to understand the context in which the school is working and the particular barriers their children face. As inspectors form their evaluation of the inclusion evaluation area, they will consider the systems and processes that leaders put in place to identify the need of children in their school and to address and to review the support that they receive. In addition to that, each area of the toolkit will have a focus on those children who face the greatest barriers to ensure that things are working well for all children, be that curriculum and teaching, the school's practice around attendance and behaviour, or personal development and well-being. And when we talk about a strengthened focus on inclusion, we're talking about how inspectors will gather evidence in a rounded and meaningful way. Excuse me. This is not about one-off checks. It's about understanding how leaders support every child, especially those who face barriers to learning and/or their well-being. And if I could draw your attention to the third bullet, case sampling. This is a form of initial evidence gathering that helps us to understand the outcomes and experiences of children who face barriers. It involves selecting a small sample of children and tracking them across inspection activities to gain a deeper understanding of their experiences and outcomes. This is then connected to wider evidence about the experiences and outcomes for all children. But case sampling is not the same as case study. We do not ask or require any staff to prepare case studies for an inspection. And finally on this slide, inspectors will go on learning walks with leaders. These are opportunities to evaluate inclusion in action across classrooms and curriculum areas, connecting what leaders tell us with what children are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. By combining these approaches, inspectors build a picture that is fair, that is evidence-based, and rooted in the reality of each school's context. And as a reminder, in a response to what we heard in the consultation, we've reduced the number of evaluation areas from those we initially proposed. The evaluation areas are now those you see on screen. You'll see that attendance and behaviour now form one evaluation area, and that curriculum and teaching form one evaluation area. Our toolkits show providers and inspectors the evaluation areas we will focus on, and within them, the standards we will evaluate to inform grading. The toolkit is not a checklist. It's used to guide conversations, reflect on evidence, and make sure grades reflect the evidence gathered. It supports a shared understanding and a discussion of the school's work, its strengths, its context, and areas for further exploration. Inspectors will apply the toolkit evaluation areas, themes, and standards, tailoring activities to each school's context. And as we've said, nothing in the standards set out in the toolkit should add to a school's workload. Nor do we expect schools to have completed any formal self-evaluation. However, you may wish to use the toolkit to support continuing improvement, and we will expect leaders to share their strengths, successes, and priorities with us. We've carefully reflected on the evaluation areas in our consultation and how these should apply for different remits. Now, looking at the toolkit, there's a covering page for each evaluation area, which includes a summative statement at the top. This is designed to help schools and inspectors see at a glance what the evaluation area is about. There follows a statement to remind us that our grading standards are based on what schools are already required to do. As Sir Martin Oliver stated, the toolkit will make it clearer than we ever have that schools shouldn't be doing anything just for the days our inspectors come in. They shouldn't be spending a single minute or penny on anything that isn't in the best interests of their children. The toolkit then sets out the most significant contributory factors that underpin our approaches to evidence gathering and grading. This is very much based on the research that underpinned the education inspection framework. We have been clear that our renewed framework will ensure there's consistency in inspection practice. We've also made sure that the toolkit is reflective of each remit and the differing phases and provider types within it. In our toolkit, we've included an explanation of how the toolkit should be applied within different school types. For example, in curriculum and teaching, inspectors will consider what practice looks like in the early years, in primary, in secondary, and in post-16. So, in early years, we'll look at how well the youngest children are developing strong foundations, such as early communication, language, and number skills. In primary, the focus is on how well leaders ensure pupils build secure knowledge and skills across the curriculum, with reading and mathematics at the core. In secondary, inspectors will consider how the curriculum builds subject expertise and supports progression. While for post-16, we'll look at how well provision equips young people for the next stage of education, training, or work. In short, the toolkit seeks to make clear how we'll apply each evaluation area in a school like yours, and what you can expect inspectors to be looking at in practice. And once we have set out what an evaluation area covers, the toolkit then moves into more detail about the kinds of evidence inspectors will gather. Each evaluation area considers themes, as you can see on the slide, and below that, prompts that guide inspectors' conversations and observations. Evaluation areas start with a theme about strategic leadership of that area and end with a theme about inclusive practices in that area. These prompts are not a checklist for schools. They're there to help inspectors think about the right questions, to explore evidence in context, and to make sure our evaluations are consistent and are fair. For example, in curriculum and teaching, inspectors will consider how well the curriculum is sequenced or how teachers adapt their approaches for pupils with different starting points. In leadership, prompts will focus on how leaders set direction, monitor impact, and support development. So, the key takeaway from this slide is that the toolkit makes inspection more transparent. Leaders can see the themes inspectors will explore and the types of questions that will help shape evidence gathering. And as we come to the next section, we can see that each evaluation area in the toolkit is graded on a 5-point scale. That is with the exception of safeguarding, which is met or not met. What you can see here are the grades we expect to see most often on inspection: needs attention, expected standard, and strong standard. The expected standard is in the middle. It's the baseline for inspection. It reflects what's required of schools, and it's the starting point for all inspections. This is why it's in the center of the page. We start each inspection with the premise that a school is meeting the expected standard. Importantly, one clear distinction is we're looking at secure fit, not a best fit. That is, to meet the expected standard, a school will need to meet all of the standards in that column. To meet the strong standard, a school will need to meet all the standards in expected and in strong. You'll see words such as typically and generally in the expected standard. This is to recognize that the expected standard is not about perfection. For example, a school may have a curriculum area that's been developed well, but doesn't yet quite meet the same standards as others consistently. So, if that were the case, the school may still be graded as having a secure fit with the expected standard in the relevant evaluation areas. The needs attention column contains indicators, not standards. An evaluation area is likely to be needs attention when there is not a secure fit for the expected standard. The indicators in this column are designed to exemplify why a school might not be meeting the expected standard. These indicators are deliberately worded positively to acknowledge what leaders are doing, but pointing out where something needs attention as it is not a secure fit with the expected standard. We've said all along we expect more schools to have varied grade profiles, including potentially areas that need attention. Sir Martin Oliver has often referenced the need for nuanced grading, stating that grades for specific evaluation areas will allow for a more detailed and representative assessment. Individual grading of the evaluation areas will enable parents and carers to see in more detail what's special about your school, what it does well, and what you're working on. And as Lee Alston, our National Director, has stated, needs attention is not a fail. It's a bit like if you take your car for an MOT and it passes but gets an advisory notice. If you don't pay attention to this, it could be a problem in the future. On the previous slide, we looked at the grades that inspectors will use most often. Here we're focusing at the two ends of the scale we expect to use much less frequently: urgent improvement and exceptional. Urgent improvement applies when the expected standards have clearly not been met and where there are serious concerns about the impact of the school's work in the relevant evaluation area. The indicators explain what this might look like in practice. These are occasions where significant improvement is needed. At the other end of the scale is exceptional. This grade is for schools where the evidence shows that standards are not only strong but truly transformational. This means everything in the strong standard is already being met securely and consistently, and leaders are making a sustained difference for pupils and children. Both urgent improvement and exceptional are important parts of the 5-part scale, but they'll be much less common in practice. The majority of evaluations will fall into the middle 3 grades that we looked at earlier.
Thank you, John. Let's just remind ourselves of some of the key aspects underpinning our renewed approach. We are moving towards a more supportive, empathetic approach to inspections, in which the starting point will be expected standard. We will further take each provider's context into account. We will adopt a more collaborative approach. We've extensively tested our inspection methodology, revising our approach to make inspection feel a more collaborative process. We will be consistent in our approach to inspections and continue to improve our process for providers to feed back about their inspection experience. While no inspection will be the same due to every school being different, we have ensured that inspectors will apply the inspection methodology consistently. We will provide constructive advice to improve based on inspection evidence and conversations with leaders. We will do all of this through a values-driven approach to inspections, that which is professional, empathetic, respectful, and courteous. The Ofsted Academy will run the largest package of training Ofsted has ever offered for an inspection launch to inspectors, alongside webinars like these and events for education professionals. Over the next few slides, we will provide a broad overview of the inspection process. Before inspectors arrive, there are several steps that help get the inspection off to a smooth start. Now, some of this will feel familiar, but there are some important changes too. In preparing for the inspection, inspectors will review information such as published data, your website, and local authority information. Now, this preparation is not about catching schools out, but making sure that inspectors are able to engage with you during the inspection planning call to better understand your context and priorities. Inspectors' first contact is through the notification call. While this is still the moment you are formally told about the inspection, it is more than a quick announcement. Inspectors will use it to begin a constructive and professional dialogue, setting the tone for the whole inspection. They will ask about your context, check everyone's well-being, and agree a time for the planning call. Schools will be asked to nominate someone to act as the main link with the inspection team, and we call them the nominee. They are to help with communication, logistics, and making sure that your context is properly understood. It's not compulsory, and you're not disadvantaged if you choose not to have a nominee. And there is optional training available for nominees to further support them in this role. The planning call that follows is a longer, collaborative conversation. Inspectors will listen to leaders outline the school's context, successes, strengths, and priorities. They will work with you to co-construct the day one timetable, confirm any reasonable adjustments, and discuss how evidence will be gathered. The aim is to make sure inspectors arrive already clear about your school's specific circumstances and the things that matter most in your school. So while the steps that we've just gone through, some of which may sound familiar, there has been some change which I want to emphasise. More consideration of context from the very first phone call, and a more collaborative approach to shaping the inspection before inspectors arrive on site. Let's consider how the inspection will be structured. Inspectors will gather evidence to enable them to celebrate strengths in children's achievement, belonging, and ability to thrive, validate leaders' priorities and progress, and highlight priorities for improvement. Inspectors will start with a brief meeting with school leaders and, if requested, may speak with staff. The lead inspector will check the single central record early on. The leaders will be able to walk their school with the lead, His Majesty's Inspector. This is an important opportunity for leaders to show the lead inspector their context. First-hand evidence gathering with a strong focus on children's experiences begins early, particularly how children are included and kept safe. Inspectors will speak with children during social times, activities or lessons, and visit classrooms alongside leaders, and walk the school to connect leadership priorities with what children actually experience. These activities allow for ongoing professional dialogue between inspectors and leaders. Inspectors will look closely at how support is provided to children who may need extra help, using case sampling to understand how inclusion works in practice. This broad approach helps build a clear picture of how well the school supports children to achieve, belong, and thrive. Now, sometimes inspectors may carry laptops during their visits, but not always. And when they don't, they'll need time back in the team room to record their observations. There will be several opportunities for leaders and the nominee, where there is one, to meet with the inspection team to discuss emerging findings. The first of these reflection meetings typically takes place around lunchtime on day one. These discussions promote open, professional dialogue and allow for adjustments to the inspection plan based on what inspectors are seeing. The afternoon continues with further evidence gathering and focused leadership meetings, including one with the designated safeguarding lead. These meetings, planned in advance, help inspectors explore key areas such as inclusion and leadership in greater depth. The day will end with a final reflection meeting between inspectors and leaders, and typically inspectors will leave site at 5 p.m. Day 2 will start with a reflection meeting and will conclude with a grading meeting. Inspectors will gather evidence through inspection activities that have been confirmed at the end of day 1. There will be further learning walks and, where appropriate, case sampling in keeping with our focus on children who are disadvantaged, those with special educational needs and/or disability, and those who are most vulnerable. Professional dialogue will continue throughout the day, rooted in the evidence that is being gathered and the inspection toolkit. These discussions will be ongoing through evidence gathering activities and in reflection meetings between inspectors and leaders, including the nominee where the school's chosen to have one. The final reflection meeting will be the formal grading meeting. This is when inspectors evaluate the evidence gathered, including that already shared and discussed at the reflection meetings. Provisional final grades will be determined based on a secure fit, and this meeting will be followed by the final feedback meeting, in which provisional grades grounded in the evidence gathered will be shared. This feedback will cover all the points that will appear in the written report card. Let's focus a little more on the nuance of our reform for maintained nursery schools. For maintained nursery schools, inspection will feel a little different. There will not be a separate grade for early years, as the whole school is early years. Instead, inspectors will weave the early years evaluation standards through the other evaluation areas. So inspectors will consider the factors which affect 2- and 3-year-olds in schools, and how the school balances the needs of the youngest children with their peers, ensuring that the most effective teaching approaches enable children to learn across the areas of learning and development in the EYFS. Inspectors will also consider any exemptions from the learning and development requirements of the EYFS, if applicable. We know that staffing and organisation in nursery schools can be complex, so inspectors will take time to understand how your provision is structured, including any flexible offer, part-time or staggered sessions. The planning call will be important for you to help the lead inspector understand the structure and organisation of your provision. They will work with you so that inspection fits around the rhythm of the day and doesn't disrupt children's routines or negatively impact on staff-child ratios. Inspectors will be aware that leaders in maintained nursery schools may not be as readily available to work with inspectors. We know that you may be included in ratios. We will work with you on the phone call to consider carefully the organisation of the timetable. Inspectors will want to understand the range of qualifications and expertise there is among the staff, if you have a special resource provision, and whether any children have stayed with you for the reception year. Inspectors will work with leaders and the nominee to find out about the leadership structure and how key responsibilities are delegated to ensure that they speak to the most appropriate people. So as we know, in maintained nursery schools, some things are just naturally different. For example, attendance and behaviour. Inspectors understand that attendance is not statutory until the start of the term after the child's 5th birthday. What matters is how leaders work with families to encourage good habits of attendance before children begin formal schooling, both through an attendance policy, which is a requirement of the EYFS statutory framework from September 2025, parental partnership, and in terms of the safeguarding context. When inspectors evaluate personal development and well-being in maintained nursery schools, they will consider the appropriateness of the personal development programme in relation to the EYFS educational programme for personal, social and emotional development, PSED. We know that for our youngest children, this will not be a standalone aspect of provision. It will be intricately woven into all you do, from your vision, values, leadership, curriculum, inclusion and pastoral support. Inspectors will be able to see the personal development throughout the day, further supported by you and your staff. Case sampling will add to the picture as we find out about the difference you make for children who have specific needs or face particular barriers to learning and/or their well-being. The characteristics of effective teaching and learning, playing and exploring, active learning and creating and thinking critically, support consideration of the development of pupils' character so that children can learn to reflect wisely, learn eagerly, behave with integrity and cooperate consistently well with others. Inspectors will see this as central to developing children's curiosity and character. And thinking about leadership here, we understand that recruiting and retaining governors for maintained nursery schools can be a challenge, particularly parent governors, as the children are in the setting for a short period of time. Inspectors will be flexible in how they engage with governors, whether through meetings in person, virtually, or by phone, to ensure governance voices are heard. We also know that some maintained nursery schools have formed federations. Our inspectors have received specific training on federations of schools, including maintained nurseries. We know that different schools will have set up their leadership structure to suit the context of the schools, and we will take time to understand how this is for the nursery that we are inspecting. We will establish who is responsible for what in the school, with consideration of the variety of governance structures. We'll meet with those responsible for the governance of the school, including the Board of Governors, at a minimum the chair of the board, and a representative from the local authority. All governors are invited to the final feedback meeting, and this can be in person or online through Teams, for example. And as we said, schools are invited to nominate a senior member of staff, a nominee, to support planning, communication, and engagement throughout the inspection. Their involvement helps the inspection to run smoothly, and detailed information on this role is available in the school's inspection information documentation, and training is available for this role if schools wish. But it's not compulsory to have a nominee, and schools would not be at any disadvantage if they do not nominate someone. And we recognise that in maintained nursery schools, the nominee may be the head teacher, or you may choose not to have a nominee. So we reiterate here that you will not be disadvantaged if there is no nominee involved in the inspection. So in summary, our new approach builds on what we know are highly effective evidence-gathering activities. However, inspections will look and feel different as we build a more detailed understanding of an individual school's context from the outset. We will be celebrating what school leaders are proud of, validating their reflections and highlighting with leaders what their priorities for improvement are. Inspectors will prioritise being out and about around the school site as soon as practicable on day one. While we're no longer carrying out deep dives, we will carry out learning walks, each with a focus that is based on what has been discussed in the planning calls and rooted in the school's context and leaders' priorities. Inspectors will carry out case sampling to get a detailed understanding of the school's provision for children who are disadvantaged, those with special educational needs and/or disability, and those that are vulnerable. Professional discussions, including those in reflection meetings, will be a key part of our new approach. Turning to our report cards now. We are bringing together the most popular preferences of parents and professionals by combining separate grades, rating scales, and short summaries into new report cards. The narrative gives a detailed picture of performance, while the 5-point scale offers the clarity and simplicity that parents asked for. We will publish data alongside the inspection report card to illustrate the provider and learner contexts and performance and attendance data over time where it's available, which will be used to inform evaluation grades. The data will differ for each remit, but will be displayed in a consistent design. So, at the end of the inspection, the lead inspector will write a report card, which will reflect the evidence gathered. The report card will be clear, concise, and focused on what matters most, as informed by the school's context, leaders' evaluation of their school, and the toolkit. It will explain the grade given for each evaluation area and make clear what the school should improve. The report card will be consistent with the verbal feedback given to the school at the end of the inspection. The key message here is that the report card will really capture the most notable features of the school so that it is truly reflective of the school and its context. Our post-inspection arrangements regarding report publication are the same as they were under the original education inspection framework. Report cards are sent to the school after moderation, quality assurance, and consistency checking. In most cases, this will be within 18 working days of the end of the inspection. Leaders should share inspection findings with all governors and trustees where it's applicable, and whoever else they consider appropriate. However, the information should not be made public or shared with parents until the school receives the final report card. And before I hand over to Kirsty, just a few words about our approach to monitoring. We may monitor a school if we have graded any evaluation area as needs attention, or it's received a grade of requires improvement for its overall effectiveness, or for any grade key judgment at its last inspection before November 2025, or we have placed it in a category of concern. The nature and extent of this monitoring will be tailored to the context of the school and the previous inspection findings. Monitoring will focus on supporting schools to reach the expected standard in any evaluation areas that we identified as needs attention or urgent improvement. Kirsty.
Thank you, Marie. And on to our timeline for change. Our response to the consultation has been published, and you'll find that on gov.uk. We'll be hosting a number of engagement events regionally, as well as hosting webinars like these and attending sector events. All education inspectors will also complete comprehensive training to support the transition to the renewed framework before being deployed on a live inspection. And for openness and transparency, full inspector training materials will continue to be published online via the Ofsted Academy once inspectors have completed their face-to-face training. In addition to the training package, Ofsted will undertake pilot visits to volunteer settings, giving inspectors vital experience of full end-to-end inspections before we reach November. These pilot visits will be quality assured by Ofsted's National Director for Education and will resume routine inspections under the renewed framework in November as planned. But before those routine inspections begin in November, we'll maintain urgent inspection and regulatory activity in schools, early education and further education. We'll also conduct a series of pilot inspections, giving inspectors the opportunity to gain that deeper understanding of the approach in practice. And for independent schools, standard inspections of independent schools are continuing through the first half of this autumn term to ensure that all schools receive a standard inspection within the current cycle. Additional inspections of independent schools will also continue as commissioned by the DfE. But standard inspections for those non-association independent schools under the renewed framework will then begin in January 2026. When we begin inspections in November, we'll do so through what we're calling a steady and assured start. In order to reassure education providers about that November rollout of inspections under the renewed inspection framework, we've set out several measures to support a steady and assured start and have few inspections to begin with. Enhanced quality assurance processes will see fewer inspections and led only by our most senior and experienced HMI inspectors. Assisted by Ofsted's permanent in-house teams, part-time external Ofsted inspectors will be phased in following that training. In the autumn term, a random sample of providers will also be invited to take part in exit interviews with HMCI, the National Director, and senior Ofsted officials to hear about their inspection experience and reflect on the implementation of the reforms. HMCI will also invite sector representatives to roundtable meetings to share their thoughts on the renewed framework as part of our commitment to transparency and listening to feedback. On occasion, we do receive requests from schools for the deferral of an inspection. During our steady and assured start, all requests for an inspection deferral will be reviewed by Ofsted's Deputy Chief Inspector to make sure that each case is treated with the utmost sensitivity and consideration. Our telephone helpline for leaders to raise queries and concerns will be open before, during, and after an inspection. And finally, measuring the impact of our changes. We'll assess how our reforms are working by delivering a programme of evaluation to understand the implementation and impact of our reforms. The evaluation plan will include various elements, including an externally commissioned evaluation of the renewed inspection framework. An independent supplier will deliver a baseline study in the summer and autumn of 2025, preliminary in-depth qualitative research in the spring term 2026, and a rolling evaluation survey carried out post-inspection to be continued each year. There'll be a programme of work to measure our consistency. This includes testing consistency through HMI shadow inspections, a desk-based study using vignettes, and through data that informs the weekly consistency meetings. Further planned evaluation of the changes, such as engagement with parents and carers, providers and inspectors about the implementation of the framework, will also happen. And before we just turn to questions, I'm going to leave this screen on for a moment or two. If you want to just find out any more about the changes and what they mean for you, then you'll find in that QR code link there a link to all of the resources that we've mentioned today. So if I ask my colleagues to join me now on camera, and hopefully we have a little bit of time to just do a few questions. So I think actually I'm going to start us off because there's been a few questions that I think I can answer with one answer that covers lots of them. And that is, we've had lots of questions about technical aspects of inspection, like when people can expect an inspection, or also around things like the role of the nominee and of case sampling. And actually, what I think I could do there is to signpost some of the documentation that's available to you on gov.uk. So not only the inspection toolkit, but also 2 other documents that I think you'll find really helpful. Firstly, the inspection information document, and that's written for you, school leaders and governors, and it sets out information about the different types of inspection, when to expect an inspection, and other information about the whole process. Now, secondly, there's our school inspection operating guide, and this outlines how inspectors will carry out an inspection. So whilst it's written for inspectors, it is also published on the gov.uk and it's available for you to read. So do look out for further information events that we'll be running. So for example, on the role of the nominee. And we also mentioned, of course, that you do have access to training that inspectors will receive. So the Ofsted Academy will run the largest package of training that Ofsted's ever offered for an inspection launch, and it will be made available to schools later this term. So hopefully that covers lots of the questions in one go. But I will just see if we've got any other questions for colleagues. So Mairead, can I come to you actually? Because there's a few questions which relate to the curriculum, and particularly for those schools that might have a maintained nursery school that's also attached to an infant school or a primary school, and they're wanting to know about those links in the curriculum from nursery through into school. So what could you tell us about that?
Okay, well, let's just start off thinking about all inspections, because during all of our inspections, the inspectors will evaluate how effectively pupils are securing those strong foundations to access the curriculum. And of course, for inspectors to find out how well these strong foundations are being secured, they will be exploring how the school is supporting children in the early stages of communication, language, reading, writing, and mathematics. And of course, we know that that's a real emphasis because our research shows us that it's really important that children secure this foundational knowledge before they move on to more complex tasks as they progress through the curriculum. So, of course, when gathering evidence about the curriculum in early years, inspectors will consider the extent to which the curriculum supports all children's progress through the educational programs in the EYFS in a way which is appropriate to children's age and stage of development. And of course, they will want to make sure that the curriculum and the schools who've thought about that curriculum and how it identifies the foundational knowledge and skills that children will need for that later learning as they progress through the rest of the curriculum. So setting up those secure foundations. And just drawing people's attention to the toolkit, which of course we've referred to, which sets out those factors that inspectors will be considering. So, for example, with early years, we've got reference to different ages and provision types. So if we think about those 2 to 3 year olds, we'll be focusing on the prime areas of learning and children's care needs and interactions, and that support for communication and language development.
Fantastic, thank you, Mairead. I think that's really helpful. And actually, there's been a few questions about when we apply the toolkit and how it works when we're considering children in early years in a primary school compared to when we're looking at a maintained nursery school, because I'm aware there may be some people here today who are representing both of those different setting types. So again, the toolkit's a really helpful place, isn't it, to go, Mairead, because it sets out where there are those differences. And I think that it does say that in the schools, all of the schools' toolkit evaluation areas apply to children in the early years, every one of them. It's been written, hasn't it, so that it applies to all pupils of all ages, in fact, right up to post 16. But there are a couple of differences, aren't there? So in a primary school, inspectors would consider early years proportionately when they grade each of those different evaluation areas, because they've got to consider them as a part of the whole school population. And there is then that separate early years grade, and that looks at early years provision as a whole. And of course, in maintained nursery schools, there's a slight difference there, because there isn't the early years grade, as I think you mentioned earlier, didn't you, Mairead? Because
I did.
it only takes account when there are children of other ages as well. So therefore, when we do look at maintained nursery schools, we're looking at all of the other areas, but we do still use that early years evaluation area because that helps us to interpret the standards in those other areas. So do have a look at the toolkit, I think is the main bit of advice there, because it gives you lots of information. And a question for you, John, and this might be a quick one actually, I think, because let's have a look. Some people have said things like, what do maintained nursery schools and staff in there need to do to prepare for an Ofsted inspection?
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. HMCI has been really clear that inspections shouldn't add unnecessary workload for staff, and the toolkit has been based on that statutory and non-statutory guidance and the expectations on schools and education professionals. There's no expectation that in maintained nurseries that you would ask children to do anything different for the days of inspection. What we're there to do is to look at typicality. What's it like to be a child in this setting? How are you supporting them to belong, achieve, and thrive? So the short answer is no, there shouldn't be any preparation done. But that said, being familiar with those documents that you've cited at the start of these questions would be a really useful place to start. But I think that's all I have to say on that, unless there's anything you would like to add, Kirsty or Mairead.
No, thank you, John. I think that will be hopefully reassuring to people that you don't need to do anything extra. That everything that you're already doing is exactly what we'll be looking at. So I think that probably brings us to the end of the time that we've got available for questions today. So all that remains is for me to say thank you so much for joining. We do hope that it's been useful to you, and we look forward to seeing you again at other events like these. So thank you very much, everybody. Good evening.